The ancient Romans invented a lot of extremely influential and extraordinary things, such as central heating and even concrete. Today, we're going back in time to take a look at some of ancient Rome's greatest contributions. So let's begin. Here are the top 15 most incredible ancient Roman inventions. Number 15. Aqueducts. It's next to impossible to think of ancient Rome without thinking of aqueducts. As the Roman Empire expanded and cities grew, the ancient Romans saw the need for fresh water. The ancient Romans weren't the first ancient civilization to use aqueducts. Both ancient Egypt and India used them. However, the ancient Romans invented a system of aqueducts that was far superior. The system was built from around 312 BC to around 226 AD, and at completion, they were more than 480 miles of aqueducts, delivering roughly 300 million gallons of water per day. The aqueducts ran both above and below ground and were extraordinarily strong and relied mostly on gravity to transport the water. But even when the water had to travel uphill, they had an invention for that. They invented the inverted siphon, which basically was a system of high-pressured pipelines. The aqueducts and the fresh water that they provided are considered one of ancient Rome's most significant and influential inventions. Number 14. The hypocaust. It could get pretty chilly in ancient Rome, especially since apartments were made of cement, so the ancient Romans invented a way to warm their houses. Hypocausts were a system of central heating, and they're actually the predecessor to modern central heating. Hypocausts were typically used in private homes, but they were also used in public buildings as a way to warm up public baths. Basically, a hypocaust was a system of hollow chambers that were built between the ground and the bottom of the room. The heat came from a furnace that stood at one end of the room. The hot air from the furnace would flow through the open spaces and then up to heat the floors. Hypocausts were sometimes also built into the walls to heat them up too. The system was pretty ingenious and it worked really well, so well that we still use similar systems today. Number 13. Bound books. Codex. If you enjoy curling up with a good book, then you have the ancient Romans to thank for that. The Romans invented the very first bound book, called a codex. The book was commissioned by Julius Caesar, who wanted a more manageable way to keep his information safe and secure. Before bound books, information was either carved onto something like clay slabs or written on long scrolls. And you can well imagine clay slabs could easily be ruined, so the information on them was easily lost. And scrolls, well, they could be as long as 32 feet, which wasn't very convenient since they had to be unrolled to be read. So the first bound books were born. The books had a cover to protect the pages and were papyrus pages. The pages were numbered with a table of contents so the reader could find the information quickly and easily. Needless to say, this transformative and incredible bound book invention took off, and now there's more than 100 million books in the world today. Number 12. Roman numerals. As you can already see, the ancient Romans invented some pretty influential things, including a standardized method of counting. Welcome to the wonderful world of Roman numerals, brought to you by, you guessed it, the ancient Romans. Roman numerals were developed out of a necessity. Apparently, counting on fingers wasn't cutting it anymore, so they created Roman numerals. Interestingly enough, the first three numerals are based on an actual hand, though. In Roman numerals, the I indicates 1 unit, or 1 finger. The V indicates 5, the V shape created by the thumb and forefinger when all fingers are held out. And the X is 10, both hands crossed over one another to make an X. The other letters, though, L, C, D, and M, don't really seem to involve hands, and it's unclear where they came from. In any case, these 7 letters make up the thousands of numbers and Roman numerals that are still used today. Number 11. Roman concrete. Concrete isn't exactly an exciting subject, but its invention was integral to ancient Rome. The ancient Romans developed several different blends of concrete, depending on the usage, but the most prevalent cement featured a mixture of volcanic ash and seawater. The secret ingredient was pozzolanic ash, which prevented cracks in the concrete from spreading. When used for buildings, Roman concrete could be faced with stone or brick, and then sometimes decorated with paintings, colored marble, or even stucco. They also developed a type of concrete that could set underwater, which was useful for building bridges and the aqueducts. Roman cement was strong and long-lasting. Some structures made from Roman concrete are still standing today, such as the Pantheon in Rome, which is a testament to just how strong this Roman concrete was. Number 10. Newspapers. Today, we rely on newspapers and digital devices to give us the news and all the pertinent information we need in one place. But this idea of centralized news reporting can be traced back to the ancient Romans. The ancient Romans invented something called Acta Diurna, which was a daily publication that provided Roman citizens with important news. The publication was inscribed into papyri, metal slabs, and even stone, and was then placed somewhere central in the city. This way, Roman citizens could gather and read all the information in one place. Acta Diurna often had information or news about military victories, important deaths and births, and even upcoming public events and celebrations. So the news was in one part official news, such as decrees of the emperor, and one part private or social, like human interest stories. Acta Diurna began in 59 BC and was used until around 222 AD. It also introduced the expression publicare e propagate, which translates as make public and propagate, which is essentially the theory behind our modern news today. Number 9. Plumbing. When it comes to plumbing and sewage management, ancient Rome was far ahead of other ancient cities. The ancient Romans had a very complex and advanced sewer system, as well as sanitation services. The first sewers were built around 500 BC in ancient Rome, and they evolved over time. Basically, waste was flushed from latrines by way of terracotta pipes into a central channel where it was connected with the main systems and was then washed away into streams and rivers. Public latrines were built all over the city, so even poorer residents who didn't have pipes could use them, although they had to do their business in pots and then empty the pots into the public latrines. They even recycled the public bathwater by using it to flush out the latrines. This put the ancient Romans on the forefront of hygiene, along with their public baths and public washing stations. Thanks to plumbing and public washing, the citizens of ancient Rome were squeaky clean, at least by ancient standards, which really isn't all that clean compared to modern-day standards. Number 8. Roman arches. In all fairness, the ancient Romans did not technically invent the arch. They did, however, invent ways to use it in architecture, so they deserve a nod for this one. The ancient Romans used architectural arches to build stronger bridges, larger buildings, and much more superior aqueducts. The ancient Romans used something called rounded arches, which were arches with circular tops. They also used something called an arcade, which was a series of rounded arches. The ancient Romans discovered the value of using architectural arches in the 1st centuries BC. From there, they incorporated arches into many of their structures, which allowed them to build stronger and bigger infrastructures. In fact, the Roman arch became one of the most widely important foundational aspects of Western architecture. It was widely used all across Europe to build things bigger and better. Number 7. The corvus. The ancient Romans were no strangers to battles at sea, and to reign supreme, they invented and built some pretty cool ships. But one of their most famous and the most significant seafaring inventions was the corvus. The corvus was a type of movable bridge. By using a corvus, a Roman ship was able to attach itself to an enemy ship, and the soldiers were able to walk across it and attack. Sometimes Romans would even engage in combat right on the corvus. The corvus was widely used during the First Punic War in sea battles against Carthage. But before this invention, Rome wasn't exactly master of the seas. But with this invention, they became a force to be reckoned with, eventually winning the First Punic War and control of Sicily and Corsica, which was a monumental step in creating their empire. Number 6. The postal system. If you think the postal system is slow today, imagine living in ancient Rome. But all jokes aside, on the speed of postal service, without the ancient Romans, we might not even have a postal system at all today. The cursus publicus was one of the earliest postal systems and was a way for messages and important notices to be transferred between provinces. The cursus publicus came about around 20 AD and was the brainchild of Emperor Augustus. As the Roman Empire grew, he saw a need for a reliable messaging system. Messages were carried from place to place by way of horses, and as well as horse carts called ridae. And because the ancient Romans had such an advanced road system, a mounted messenger could travel about 50 miles per day. This is not quick by today's standard, but at the time, it was revolutionary. Number 5. Law. The 12 Tables and Corpus Juris Civilis. Some of the law terms we still use today came from the ancient Romans. Pro bono, affidavit, subpoena. Sound familiar? They all come from ancient Rome. The ancient Romans invented a very early code of law called the 12 Tables. It was first adopted around 450 BC, and it detailed various laws regarding really important things like property, theft, and divorce. And it outlined not only these laws, but the punishments for each, so that punishments became standardized. And while the 12 Tables was very influential, it was eventually followed by an even more influential invention, the Corpus Juris Civilis. This was established between 529 and 535 AD under the Emperor Justinian, and it was an ambitious document that essentially synthesized Rome's history of law into one account. It went on to become the basis for a lot of the world's legal systems, and many of the ideas and concepts in it are still being used today in modern law. So just how influential was the Corpus Juris Civilis? Well, have you ever heard of the phrase innocent until proven guilty? Pretty sure most people have, since it's basically the entire concept behind modern law. And yep, that concept comes from the ancient Romans. Number 4. Surgical tools. The Romans invented some of the very first precision surgical tools that went on to influence a lot of modern-day surgical implements in a major way. Ancient Romans saw the need for precision when operating, so they created tools that could do just that. They invented syringes, scalpels, forceps, and bone saws. Some of the surgical tools created by the ancient Romans were so good and so precise that they were used for centuries, unchanged and unadapted. And in addition to their incredible surgical tools, they basically invented the concept of field doctors. Because they had created surgical tools that could easily be transported, they began to send medical professionals right out onto the battlefield to help wounded soldiers. These professionals were called chirurgus, and some of the jobs that they performed included removing arrows, sewing up wounds on the spot, giving medicine, and performing other minor procedures. Both surgical tools and field surgery gave ancient Romans a cutting edge when it came to medical procedures. A lot of people were both saved in hospitals and on the field because of these inventions. Number 3. Strong roads and highways. It's often said that all roads lead to Rome. Perhaps this is because Rome actually built roads that could withstand the test of time. The ancient Romans, with their expanding empire, were smart enough to realize the importance of a hardy, well-built road system. In fact, their roadways were crucial to the expansion of their empire. Roads before the Romans were usually just built from a mixture of gravel and rocks. These roads didn't last long and could be very hard to travel on, so the ancient Romans fixed this by making roads with bricks of granite or hardened volcanic lava. These bricks were much stronger than just gravel and rocks, and these new roads could withstand both heavy traffic and inclement weather. Furthermore, they built roads with slight banking so that the rainwater didn't sit on the roads after it rained. But they didn't stop there. They built roads along surveyed courses, built bridges, and even cut through hills. The roads were used by the armies, by officials and civilians, and for carrying communications and goods. And these sturdy roads were far-reaching, too. At Rome's peak, there were 372 roads connecting the empire's 113 provinces and 29 military highways from the capital. All in, there were more than 250,000 miles of roads, and by 200 AD, more than 50,000 miles of these roads were paved. The care they took in building these roads and the invention of their highway system is truly incredible, and some of these roads are still in use today. Number 2. Apartment complexes, insulae. If you live in an apartment or a condo building, you can credit the ancient Romans for that. The ancient Romans invented the idea of stacked housing, which is clearly a massive contribution to modern society. The apartments they created were called insulae, which translates as islands. They called them islands because the stacked housing took up entire blocks, with roads that flowed around the housing, sort of like water. The housing consisted of 6 to 8 apartment blocks that were built around a staircase and featured a central courtyard in the middle. The bottom of the buildings were usually composed of shops and businesses. Some of the insulae buildings even had names. They were usually named after the owner of the building. The buildings were owned by rich Romans who collected the rent from the tenants who lived there. Sound familiar? It should, because this was modern high-density living in the making. The idea of building up and not out took off in Rome like wildfire, and by the 4th century AD, Rome boasted more than 45,000 insulae. On the lower floor, the apartments were called canacula, and these ground floor apartments were bigger than their higher counterparts and more sought after, therefore they had a higher value. The apartments at the top were called celle, which they were usually a lot smaller than the sanacula. The upper apartments were also not as desirable. They had safety issues and a lot of stairs, so they were usually occupied by much poorer people than those who lived in the saniculas at ground level. It's believed that the apartments themselves varied in luxury, with some having big windows and varying amounts of rooms. The insulae could be as tall as 9 stories high, which is a far cry from some of our modern skyscraping condo buildings, but still impressive nonetheless. Insulae apartments were generally for the medium to lower class citizens of Rome. Those with money, the upper class, didn't like stacked housing. They lived in a domus, which was a single-family house located in a different part of the city. These insulae gave way to grid-like cities, with each insulae becoming a neighborhood of sorts, with its own shops, courtyards, annoying neighbors, and the like. Number 1. The Julian calendar. Probably the biggest invention and contribution by the ancient Romans is the Julian calendar, since it's the predecessor to the calendar that most of the world uses today, the Gregorian calendar. The Julian calendar had some heavy hitters behind its creation, namely Greek mathematicians and astronomers. The Julian calendar was used for more than 1,600 years in both the Roman Empire and most of the Western world before it was finally replaced by the Gregorian calendar in 1582. However, very little about the Julian calendar was changed when the Gregorian calendar was created. The only real change was that the average length of the year was reduced slightly from 365.25 days to 365.24 days. The most notable thing about the Julian calendar was that it was introduced with 2 types of years. The first is the normal year, which has the standard 365 days. And the second is the leap year, which has 366 days, with the pattern being 3 normal years followed by 1 leap year. But the addition of a leap year wasn't the only thing that the Julian calendar introduced. It also added 10 days to the length of a year, from the 355-day pre-Julian calendar year to the 365-day calendar year that we use today. To achieve this, 2 days were added to January, August, and December, and 1 day was added to April, June, September, and November. The start of the year was also changed from March 1st to January 1st. All of these changes were a pretty significant shift from the pre-Julian calendar, and because the Julian calendar formed the basis for the Gregorian calendar, this ancient Roman invention is pretty significant. It is, after all, how we count and structure our days, months, and years, so we've given the Julian calendar the honorable number 1 spot on this list of 15 incredible ancient Roman inventions. Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.